A few announcements before Reverend Janet begins this morning's worship. The Board of Trustees has voted to make mask wearing optional while we are seated. On our way in and out of the sanctuary, please do keep your masks on, and we will wear them also while we are singing. Otherwise, if you're comfortable to do so, you may take them off while you're seated in the pew. You have perhaps noticed the harpsichord at the front of the sanctuary. It's there because this afternoon, the Gloucester Meeting House Foundation will present a live concert right here to celebrate the birthday of Johann Sebastian Bach. The event will be simulcast on the Foundation's YouTube channel and will be available afterwards for those who are unable to attend. The event is free and it's open to the public, but a collection will be taken to benefit Ukrainian relief efforts through the International Rescue Committee. Again, the event is today at 4:30, and there will be birthday cake for Johann. The new the new nonviolence group has held its first meeting of reading and discussion, and if you're interested in participating, please contact Shep Abbott. Is Shep here today? No. He's in the church directory. Speaking of which, as we mentioned last week, you're invited to pick up a copy of the church directory in the entry house. They are yellow this year, and also offering envelopes are available in the library for pickup, if you'd like offering envelopes. As a reminder, we do not publish phone numbers or email addresses for safety and privacy online or in email, so it is good to have a church directory with contact information of church members. The next book in the Congregational Reading Series is Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer. The book discussion will take place on April 8th. For more information about the book, please see the weekly email, which has all kinds of other information as well. And for friends watching from home today, we want to remind you that we have attached this morning's order of service, if you'd like to follow along. It's in the weekly email announcements that were sent out on Friday. So if you'd like to download that, you could do it now, follow along. Again, it's in the church's Friday weekly email announcements. Andy Soul has included some very interesting notes on the music. So that's another reason to download the order of worship. Thanks for that, Andy. The orchid is kindly given today. The orchid and the pussy willows are kindly given today by Sally Waite, who often provides beautiful flowers for the service. Thanks, Sally. Now, if you would like to donate flowers for a Sunday service, you are very warmly invited to do so. The flowers really do enhance our experience here on Sunday morning. So if you'd like to give flowers any Sunday morning, please contact Christine in the church office. You can donate them in honor or in memory or in celebration of someone or something, or just donate them. Also, before we get started, if you'd like to light a candle or chalice along with us here, if you're at home, please go and get one now so that we can do this ritual together in spirit in a little while.
Happy spring, everybody. Doesn't exactly look like it, but we know it's there. 11:30 this morning, in case you're keeping track as carefully as I am. Anyway, welcome to the Gloucester Unitarian Universalist Church. It's wonderful to see you here and also to welcome folks who are watching us from home, and just to know that you are welcome however you choose to be here, in person or from home. We're happy to have you with us today. If you are interested in finding out more about our community, we invite you to either sign the guest book out in the entry house or to fill out one of the yellow cards that are on the backs of the pews. And all you have to do is then put that in the collection plate as it comes by. And we would love to be in touch with you. We are a welcoming congregation, which means that we are welcoming and affirming to people of all sexual orientations and gender expressions. And as a community, we care very much about the natural world, about justice for all, and about each other and all of you. So again, welcome. I had a couple of things I wanted to mention briefly this morning. One is that it's occurring to me that with all of the chaos of shutting down again and then reopening, that I haven't been saying much about my upcoming sabbatical. So it's coming up. I took 1 month of it last spring, and now I will be taking the remaining 3 months that I have, and I'll be taking them in May, June, and July. So I just wanted to start mentioning this out loud and making sure that everybody is prepared for this. And I also want to say that behind the scenes, we've been working hard to plan and organize, and you're never even going to notice that I'm gone. It'll be fine. But there is a lot of planning going into this to ensure that it's a smooth 3 months. So there'll be more about that, but I just wanted to start making sure that everybody's aware. And then just a word about our service this morning. As I mentioned last week, the theme for this month is renewing our faith. And last week, you all gave a beautiful demonstration of faith. When you got up to share your stories, you shared, your faith and your trust in our community, and it was a beautiful thing to see. And so we will be continuing to explore the topic of faith today. And there's many different kind of disparate elements of the service. And so I just wanted to mention that, the story of Queen Esther and different poems that we'll be using. And I just wanted to invite you to listen carefully to the theme underlying all of these pieces that might not seem all that connected. It's a lot. So with that, I invite us to deepen our hearts and our spirits for worship. Enter now into this time. Bring all of your wants, your hopes, your needs, and your longings. Bring all your imaginings. However you came to be here this morning, imagine all that has brought you to this moment. The swirling of stardust, the motion of life, tides and time and winds, the longing of your heart, the voice that asks, what if? All of these have come together now in this moment, at this turning of the earth on its axis, at this point in the unfolding of your life. However you came to be here right now, let us worship together. We have resumed our opening hymns after 2 years. And so you're welcome to rise now in body or spirit to sing our opening hymn, which is number 108 in the gray hymnal, My Life Flows On in Endless Song. Andy will play it through once for us first, and then you're welcome to stand and sing, but let's wear our masks. Unitarian Universalist faith tradition, we enter into worship with the kindling of our chalice. May its light guide our way forward in our lifelong search for meaning, connection, and justice. We take a moment now to affirm the covenant that we share with one another. The words are printed in your order of service if you'd like to read along with us. In the light of truth and the warmth of love, we gather to seek, to sustain, and to share. Life is a gift for which we are grateful. We gather in community to celebrate the glories and the mysteries of this great gift. Please be seated. There is a war raging far from here. And although we are far apart, the Ukrainian people are held closely in our hearts in these days as they resist a ruthless invader. So this morning and on Sundays, until peace is restored, we will light a candle for peace. Been a lot of religious activity this week between St. Patrick's Day and of course now a lot of our Catholic friends and family are celebrating the festival of St. Joseph, the Feast of St. Joseph, which was this week as well. And our Jewish friends and family members were celebrating Purim. And Purim is a commemoration of the story of when Queen Esther saved the Jewish people of Persia. And so I thought I would tell that story for you this morning. It might not be as familiar as some. Now, once upon a time, there was a king of Persia whose name was Xerxes. And he had a queen whose name was Queen Vashti. And one time he held a banquet for his friends, and he summoned Queen Vashti to come and be in the banquet with them, and she refused. Now, you didn't refuse the king when you were summoned, and so Queen Vashti was banished from the kingdom, sent away. Well, now, of course, they needed a queen, so they started to recruit a queen, and people all over Persia started sending their beautiful young daughters to the court to essentially audition for the role of queen. Now, there was a beautiful young woman named Esther, or in Hebrew, Hadassah. Esther was an orphan, and she had been raised by her uncle, whose name was Mordecai. And again, she was very beautiful, but she was Jewish. But Mordecai sent her to court. She was very, very reluctant. She was afraid. She didn't want to be queen. But you can imagine what happened next. She stayed in the harem that was set up for all these young women and eventually had her opportunity to appear before the king. And of course, we know what happens next. She was chosen to be the queen, despite her reluctance. And there she was. Well, not long after that, Mordecai was at court, and he overheard some people talking about a plot to kill the king, to kill King Xerxes. He got word to Queen Esther. She had to warn the king. And so she was able to do that. She warned the king that there was a plot to kill him. He was able to stop the plot. And after that, he knew who Mordecai was, and he knew that he owed him a favor. Well, but at the same time, the king adopted a new advisor, a new member of his court, a man named Haman. Now, Haman was evil. He's a very bad man. And one day, Haman encountered Mordecai at court, and Mordecai refused to bow to him. And Haman was enraged. How dare he? And so Haman decided that all the Jews must die. And in fact, he took great pleasure in erecting a gallows, especially for Mordecai. Now, luckily, Mordecai happened to overhear stories of this happening as well. And he went to his niece, Queen Esther, and he said, "You must go to the king. You must stop this from happening." And she was terrified. First of all, she wasn't allowed to approach the king and talk to him when she wanted to. She might be banished. And second of all, she was now going to have to tell him that she was Jewish. She did not want to do this. And Mordecai said to her, "Perhaps this is why you were chosen to be queen. Perhaps you are the queen for a time such as this." She prayed and she fasted, and she prayed and she fasted for 3 whole days before she could summon the courage to burst in on the king and make an appearance. She was so terrified she fainted. And he took pity on her and listened to her, and she told him everything that she had to tell him. And he agreed to stop the plot to kill the Jews. And he did. And of course, what happened was that Haman himself was the one who ended up being put to death. And he was put to death on the very scaffold that he had erected to hang Mordecai from. So this happened apparently about this time of year, however many thousands of years ago. And so the Jews celebrate the holiday of Purim every year, where they retell the story, they read the book of Esther in the Hebrew Bible, and they have parties. They sing and they dance and they dress up in costumes, and they make merry. They are deliberately silly. And one of the things that they do is they eat special cookies that are known as Hamantaschen, that are shaped like King Haman's hat. And they do this to remember the story of Esther and evil Haman, and the triumph of goodness over evil and love over hatred. And so they remember Esther and her courage and her faithfulness, as we do today. So thank you for listening.
Hymnal. Number 610 in your hymnal. And please read the italicized lines. Where in our hearts is that burning of desire? Whence comes that drive in us?
We look to the starry sky and love storms in our hearts.
Whence comes that storm?
The journey of love is a very long journey.
But sometimes with a sigh, you can cross that vast desert.
Search and search again without losing hope.
You may find sometime a treasure on your way.
My heart and my eyes are all devoted to the mission.
I invite us now into a time of prayer and meditation. We will begin this time this morning with an excerpt from the poem Wage Peace by Judith Hill. This poem is often attributed to Mary Oliver. Wage peace with your breath. Breathe in firefighters and rubble. Breathe out whole buildings and flocks of red-winged blackbirds. Breathe in terrorists and breathe out sleeping children and freshly mown fields. Breathe in confusion and breathe out maple trees. Breathe in the fallen and breathe out lifelong friendships intact. Wage peace with your listening. Hearing sirens, pray loud. Wage peace. This poem is an example of the Buddhist practice of Tonglen, which is a Tibetan tradition also known as taking and sending. In Tonglen, we take into our bodies the suffering, grief, and the pain of others through our breath, our inhalations. We bring them into ourselves. And we then send compassion and love back to those who are suffering with our exhalations. Wage peace with your breath. And so we're going to practice this now. We're going to spend a moment thinking of people in pain. Perhaps yourself, someone you love close to home, perhaps strangers, people we don't know, that we know are suffering in a foreign land. And I will invite us into practice with the sound of the singing bowl. We will inhale in suffering and exhale out peace and love. And then, when the singing bowl sounds again, we will pause for our moment of silent meditation. Amen.
The reading today is Amanda Gordon's inaugural poem, The Hill We Climb, which she read exactly which we will hear after the offering.
Last week it was me.
My apologies.
No apologies. As I said, last week I forgot the opening hymn. Now, more than ever, it matters that we are here, sharing our experiences and having a good laugh together. And now more than ever, our churches have an important role in our lives as we struggle to regain our normal lives, regain our footing. And more than ever, this community of faith, this place of memory and hope, provides the roots and the wings for us to speak and to act on behalf of those whose voices so often go unheard. We are here today because of the love and the faith of all of those who have gone before us. We carry on the work that they began, and we will shepherd the story forward for all of those who come after us. For the life and the health of this congregation and its ministries, this morning's offering will now be gratefully received. Blessings upon the givers and upon your gifts.
And now, Amanda Gordon's poem, The Hill We Climb, which she read exactly 1 year ago at the inauguration of Joseph Biden. When day comes, we ask ourselves, where can we find light in this never-ending shade? The loss we carry, a sea we must wade. We braved the belly of the beast. We've learned that quiet isn't always peace, and the norms and notions of what just isn't always justice. And yet, the dawn is ours before we knew it. Somehow, we do it. Somehow we weathered and witnessed a nation that isn't broken, but simply unfinished.
And yes, we are far from polished, far from pristine, but that doesn't mean we are striving to form a union that is perfect. We are striving to forge our union with purpose, to compose a country committed to all cultures, colors, characters, and conditions of man. And so we lift our gaze, not to what stands between us, but what stands before us. We close the divide because we know to put our future first, we must first put our differences aside. We lay down our arms so we can reach out our arms to one another. We seek harm to none and harmony for all.
Let the globe, if nothing else, say this is true, that even as we grieved, we grew, that even as we hurt, we hoped, that even as we tired, we tried, that we'll forever be tied together, victorious, not because we will never again know defeat, but because we will never again sow division.
It's because being American is more than a pride we inherit. It's the past we step into and how we repair it. We've seen a force that would shatter our nation rather than share it, would destroy our country if it meant delaying democracy. And this effort very nearly succeeded. But while democracy can be periodically delayed, it can never be permanently defeated. In this truth, in this faith, we trust. For while we have our eyes on the future, history has its eyes on us.
We will not march back to what was, but move to what shall be. A country that is bruised but whole, benevolent but bold, fierce and free. We will not be turned around or interrupted by intimidation, because we know our inaction and inertia will be the inheritance of the next generation, become the future. Our blunders become their burdens. But one thing is certain: if we merge mercy with might and might with right, then love becomes our legacy and change our children's birthright.
So let us leave behind a country better than the one we were left. Every breath from my bronze-pounded chest, we will raise this wounded world into a wondrous one. We will rise from the golden hills of the West. We will rise from the windswept Northeast, where our forefathers first realized revolution. We will rise from the lake-rimmed cities of the Midwestern states. We will rise from the sun-baked South. We will rebuild, reconcile, and recover. And every known nook of our nation and every corner called our country, our people, diverse and beautiful, will emerge battered and beautiful.
When day comes, we step out of the shade of flame and unafraid. The new dawn balloons as we free it. For there is always light, if only we're brave enough to see it. if only we're brave enough to be it.
This fog that we're in right now, especially yesterday, has sent me into a very pensive frame of mind. Yesterday I stood and stared out for long periods of time at the patterns created by the branches of the bare trees, which was about all that I could see. I find fog depressing, but it's also fascinating. Fog obscures our view, and it makes it hard to see. But looked at it a different way, fog also softens our view. It softens the hard edges of what we usually see, and it offers a different perspective. And then, of course, yesterday was such a sharp contrast to the spring day on Friday. That day, I had lunch outdoors with two colleagues. We couldn't remember the last time that we saw each other in person. And we happily sat and watched the parade of people passing by. All the new babies were out for an outing, all the ones who had been born in the fall and the winter. And it was just life bubbling up once again. It's irrepressible, and it's emerging every chance it gets. And then, of course, yesterday, the fog returned, the chill dampness, the dimming of light, and the loss of vision. Now, of course, these different kinds of days describe our human lives from start to finish, and we all know that. We know that there is sunshine and fog, that life is fully on display, and then withdraws again. But right now, during this time of the 2-year anniversary of the start of the COVID pandemic, that cycle of emerging and withdrawing feels particularly present in our lives as we start to step forth once again following the Omicron surge. These last 2 years have served up many challenges. First and foremost for everyone has been the challenge of safety and maintaining our health. But besides that, one of the hardest aspects of this pandemic period has been to witness the casual cruelty and the frequent nastiness that humans have shown one another. I am a student of history, and I have long been fascinated by the epidemic of 1918. And I'm sure that some of you have heard me say that whenever I worried and wondered if something like that could ever happen again, happen to us today, in this era of modern medicine, I was always comforted by my faith in science and knowledge, and I would reassure myself that we would be unlikely to ever repeat such a catastrophe. Well, so much for that. Sadly, I have been disappointed over and over again as people ignored and flouted public health advice, rejected science, were drawn in by conspiracy theories, and were hostile and abusive to each other, particularly to anyone perceived as an authority. From behaving badly on airplanes to yelling at teenage store clerks, some people have been at their absolute worst in the last 2 years. And I have had to work hard to sustain my faith in the ultimate goodness of humanity and in what our earlier Unitarians used to proclaim as the progress of mankind, onward and upward forever. Our theme for the month of March is renewing faith. This can be such a challenging topic for Unitarian Universalists, and never more so than right now. as we try to recover from this roller coaster of the past 2 years, this roller coaster of emergence and withdrawal over and over again, and only now to be daily confronted by the war in Ukraine, by images of the cruelty that humans can inflict on one another. We have seen the sunshine alternating with the fog, and we wonder where the truth of life lies. We worry about our country, about the fabric of goodwill and the faith in the common good that seems so badly eroded. Will goodness or evil prevail? We can never be completely sure from one day to the next when our view is so often obscured, and that is where faith comes in. I always begin a conversation about faith with challenging how we define it. We talked about this a little bit last week. What do we mean when we use the word faith? And as I have said many times, we often use the word faith incorrectly. We use it to mean religious belief. We will say, for example, that a person belongs to the Catholic faith or to the Jewish faith, or maybe people will say that they have no faith. But faith is so much more complicated than religious belief, so much larger. And as I said briefly last week, faith is available to anyone at all, whether or not you follow the tenets of a traditional religion. No one should ever feel that they are outside of faith. After all, the origins of the word are closely tied to fidelity or trust. It's about commitment and loyalty. Now, if we're not careful, religious beliefs can function like the fog closing in around us. They can limit our view, keep us from seeing the wholeness of life and the interconnectedness of all life. Faith, on the other hand, encourages us to open ourselves, open our eyes and our hearts and our minds to all that we can see in the bright sunshine. And faith reminds us always that the sun will return, that throughout our lives we hold the brightness and the gloom together, the goodness and the evil. Faith, wrote UU minister Daniel Cantor, is an orientation to life. It is looking out at the world from a particular perspective and using that perspective to consider the meaning of our existence. Renewing our faith invites us to ask ourselves about our perspective. To what are we loyal? What do we believe in? I find this word orientation or perspective to be very helpful. It speaks to our own view of the world, how we see life unfolding, and how we find meaning in life. In our religious tradition, Unitarian Universalism, we encourage everyone to grow in faith by developing their own answers to questions such as these. Of course, the wider world has often distilled this message into saying that UUs can believe whatever they want. And in truth, it's far more complicated than that. Unitarian Universalism wants everyone to examine their own perspectives, to learn about their own orientation, about their loyalties, and their commitments. How do you see the world? Where do you find meaning? I've pondered these questions throughout my life. I've realized over and over again that I am oriented toward the forces that generate life and sustain it, and that I am watching for these. I'm sure many of you are familiar with the story originally told by Fred Rogers, TV's Mr. Rogers, who said that his mother always taught him, whenever there was a crisis, to look for the helpers. I am oriented toward the helpers. They are there. You will see them when you look, and they offer us faith and reassurance in the goodness of people. I am oriented toward other things as well. Humor, for example. No sooner did the COVID-19 epidemic arrive on our shores, so did the jokes. And a good laugh helps keep us going. It orients us away from despair and fear and anger. It orients us back toward life and toward each other. I am also deeply oriented to community, toward life and each other. I'm oriented toward knowing that what we face, we do not have to face alone. I am oriented toward the arc of the universe that bends toward justice. And I am oriented toward the generative and sustaining force of life itself, which I call love. If we look for this life force, we see it everywhere, all the time. We see it even here in early March as the earth begins almost imperceptibly to return to life. We trust the sun and the tilt of the earth's axis. And right now we see the life force in Ukraine, in the midst of war and death and chaos, even in the midst of all the suffering. We see it in people's defiance, in their willingness to fight to maintain a society that will enable its people to flourish. We have spoken of faith from different perspectives this morning. We've heard the story of Queen Esther risking her life out of loyalty and love of her people. We have heard the words of poets. Breathe in firefighters and rubble. Breathe out whole buildings and flocks of red-winged blackbirds. Whence comes that drive in us? Asked our Pakistani poet. We look to the starry sky and love storms in our hearts. Whence comes that storm? The journey of love is a very long journey. Every day now we are confronted with images of death and destruction, buildings burning, people fleeing. What we are seeing is hatred arising, trying to conquer, and love fighting back. In video after video, we watch as firefighters put out fires in burning buildings and carry out injured people. We see all the helpers, the folks helping refugees, the organizations providing food and clothing and shelter, the doctors trying to save lives as supplies dwindle. Love emerges in these times. Love fights back. Look for the helpers. We have been so inspired by the heroic example set by the Ukrainian president, Volodymyr Zelensky. And I watch him in motion every day, rallying his nation, exhorting the world to help, fighting for his citizens and their country. And I see love in action. Whence comes that drive in us? Beneath everything we have talked about today is one simple thing: love. Love as the force of life. Love as the orientation we must place our faith in and turn toward always. Day by day, we live trying to maintain a balance between all the forces, fog and sunshine, goodness and evil. It is impossible to tell from one day to the next what will prevail. The view, as the Reverend Theodore Parker once told us, is a long one. I do not pretend to understand the moral arc of the universe. My eye reaches but little ways, he wrote. But like him, we must decide on our perspective to choose how to frame our vision and what to look for. Parker famously went on to say, I can divine the moral arc by conscience, and from what I see, I am sure that it bends toward justice. May your faith be in the force of love underneath everything, some days in full view, on other days obscured. When day comes, we step out of the shade of flame and unafraid. The new dawn balloons as we free it. For there is always light, if only we're brave enough to see it. If only we're brave enough to be it. Blessed be, and amen. I invite us now to say the unison prayer that is printed in your order of service. Eternal Spirit, Earth Maker, Pain Bearer, Life Giver, Source of all that is and that shall be, Father and Mother of us all, loving God, in whom is heaven. The hallowing of your name echo through the universe. The way of your justice be done by all peoples of the world. Your heavenly will be. Your commonwealth of peace and freedom sustain our hope and come on earth. With the bread that we need for today, feed us. In the hurts we absorb from one another, forgive us. In times of temptation and test, strengthen us. From trial too great to endure, spare us. From the grip of all that is evil, free us. For you reign in the power of the word that is love, now and forever. Amen. Our closing hymn is number 344 in your gray hymnal, A Promise Through the Ages Rings. And if anyone would like to come forward and help lead the hymn, please feel free. There is finally only one thing required of us, That is, to take life whole, the bright and the dark together. To live the life that is given us with courage and humor and truth. We have such a little moment out of the vastness of time for all of our wondering and loving. Therefore, let there be no half-heartedness. Rather, let the soul be ardent in its pain, in its yearning, in its praise. Then shall peace enfold our days, and glory shall not fade from our lives. Amen. And now, folks at home, I invite you to hold up your candle, and together we will blow them out as Lucille extinguishes our chalice, and we say the words to extinguish the chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Go in peace and return in love. Amen.